in any organization, when fear is present, it's the ultimate performance killer. There was a lot of fear towards the end of the Pac-12 Network's existence. And so what was so interesting, that last year, 2023, it was our best year of television that we had been a part of. And I think it was because the thing we were most afraid happening finally happened. It has made me realize, like, why do we wait until the end for our best stuff? Why do we wait for the eulogy to say our best and most important things to people?
Hello, everyone. Welcome to LED. This is Leadership with Ed. I'm Ed McGill, co-founder and partner of McGill Jungie Wealth Management. Continuing my really 35 plus year journey on leadership, how to inspire others and just increase performance of those around us. I'd like to thank everyone for being on our inaugural season this year of LED. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube. If you like what we're talking about, find it helpful, make sure you like, subscribe, click, post, forward, all those great things. I know you're going to love Ashley Day, so this one will definitely be one you want to like and subscribe to. And just so you know, episodes drop every other Wednesday, except for the month of October. We're still in Women-Owned Business Month, so we've been dropping every week and highlighting great women across the country. So today, we are going to have on here Ashley Adamson, and I actually have to, it's one of the few I have to read because there's so many things here. She's a 3-time Emmy award-winning broadcaster, Big Ten Network football host, co-founder of Tambor, an audio legacy storytelling company. So we're going to talk about her entrepreneurship. And she hosts the podcast Your Mom with Lisa McCaffrey, who's not only the mom of Christian McCaffrey, but Luke McCaffrey, who had a brief stint at Nebraska. My Huskers there for a while, where he played quarterback and then got smart and became a receiver and made it to the NFL that way. So Ashley, welcome to LED.
Thank you. It is awesome to be here. That was quite an intro. I appreciate it. And I just want to start out by saying, like, it since the moment that we connected on a Zoom, I don't know, maybe a month and a half ago, it's been awesome to get to know you, and you have been so kind, and I've learned a lot from you, and I'm excited to do this. So thanks for having me on.
Oh, you're welcome. And as you know from Kim, periodically I run across people and I'm like, okay, that's great energy, great enthusiasm. And I can see what you're trying to build and do. And then I just like helping people get elevated and do that. Not that you need a ton of help, but I see a vision for where you can go, Ashley, in this next decade and stuff. And we are having a lot of fun. And it's just part of the joy of whether it be podcasts or your travels and things you're doing is when you find people where there's just high energy, excitement, you kind of gravitate towards each other and the stories are fun. You laugh a lot. And at the end of, what'll be, 40 minutes or so, you'll be like, boy, that went fast and I wish I had another hour. So this is going to be awesome.
Yeah, I would just add to that. I think that's one of the best parts about podcasts. We go 100 miles an hour all the time in, the world and the culture that we live in. And so my favorite thing about podcast is, like, you're sitting down and you're having a conversation with someone and there's not, you're not texting, you're not trying to do 18 other things. It's just a time to actually ask some real questions and get deeper and dig a little bit deeper and not skim along the surface all the time. So I love it. I'm ready to dig in.
I would agree with that. And usually, as my team knows, I'm never really nervous talking to anyone. And part of the reason why I had a little anxiety here is Ashley is a professional interviewer, has her own podcast, spends time in front of the... I don't think so. So I'm like, okay, what if she reverses this on me? And so we're going to have to keep her on track. And one of the things I found funny as I was reading, about you, because I was going to ask this question and you said, there's this double standard where people ask me, how did you get into sports? Because you're a woman. And that probably was part of my initial questioning is tell us how you got into this. So I'm going to reframe that because you also said there's never been a better time for women in broadcasting, and you're excited about not only developing and continuing to grow yourself, but passing the baton and, to others that are up and coming, and what a great environment for women in sports. But, I think people are curious, how does someone go from graduating from Boston College and then Boston for your MBA, and then all of a sudden ending up on the Big Ten Network winning Emmys? What's that path? Because you don't start there, and there had to be a few lucky breaks and some people that believed in you along the way.
No, there certainly were. And I will, just to correct you, because you are making me sound even, better than you possibly ever could try to. But I got my master's in broadcast journalism at Boston University and did my undergrad at BC. So you're spot on with that. I will say, Ed, I mean, it's a long journey. And it's funny when you ask that question, the person who planted the seed in my head when I was in high school was my dad. He's who I grew up, loving. I grew up loving sports because I had parents who loved sports. And my dad, went to Notre Dame and took me to Notre Dame games ever since I was a little girl. And so the brainwashing certainly started early. But those were some of my most formative and special memories. I played sports, and that was how, I certainly connected with him. And that was kind of a big part of our relationship early on, and still is. And so I think that he saw a path there because we both knew that I wasn't going to play sports professionally. And when he first planted it, I just thought, why would anyone, why would I be qualified to talk about sports on television? And as I moved along and, really my story is longer and I won't, kind of belabor the point, but it was a mix of blind faith that you believe that you just take the next step forward and you're going to say yes to things and you're going to be willing to move places that no one in their 20s would want to move, and you're going to say yes to salaries that no one ever would, in their right mind think that was what you should take as a salary as a professional. But there was just this belief that I had, and sort of one foot in front of the other. And then I got really lucky, and I had some people that believed in me before I even fully believed in myself. And every job that I got in local news, and then at the Pac-12 Network, when I moved out to San Francisco, which is where I live now, I was always taking a job that I wasn't ready for yet, but whoever was hiring me saw something in me that they thought I could get there. So I have had so many people along the way that have given me a hand up. And one of my very first mentors, a guy by the name of Bill Fine, who my dad actually introduced me to him. He was the general manager at WCVB in Boston, where I had an internship. And so I remember one time thanking him and just saying, "You've been so helpful to me, and I'm never going to be able to repay you." And he said, "Just make sure that when you're in a position, which is going to be before you know it, to help other people, help as many people as you can all the time." And I have tried to take that to heart, and I tell that to young people that I now, am helping as well, that, yeah, this is how it works. Like, you're supposed to pull people up along with you as you go. And it's so often you get caught in trying to get to where you want to be. But I believe if you try and help get people enough to where they want to be, you'll end up someplace special.
So she said something important there of lifting, people up along with you, because one of the marks of a great leader is being secure enough in your own abilities that you're willing to lift others up and realize that isn't going to shortcome my opportunity, that there's plenty of opportunities for everyone, and you're secure enough just in your own self and skill set. So that probably was an interesting, piece as you came up. And as you talk about that also, it was funny, as you mentioned about taking jobs and pay and everything else. I read that in one of your online biographies, is that you see your friends getting married, having kids, having really good jobs, pay, and that wasn't you early on. It was that grind. It was that grit along the way, wasn't it?
There were some dark moments along the way. And there were, and you look around and, again, when you're in your 20s and your friends all have these paths, the hard thing about broadcasting, and this is what I tell people getting into this business all the time, in almost every, and it's changed maybe a little bit now because the workforce has changed and jobs are changing so much, but in almost every profession, A, B, C is going to get you to D, right? Like, there's a path that you walk, that steps that are required, training, schooling, you can see it laid out. In broadcasting, you can take every step that you think is the right one, and there is no guarantee that the timing is going to come together, that the opportunities are going to come together. And so I remember it was Sean McDonough who spoke at a class at BU one time, and I use this analogy all the time. He said, the thing they don't tell you about sports broadcasting is that there's no light at the end of the tunnel, because the tunnel is circular. And so all of a sudden you're walking down
what a great line.
Dark tunnel, and the next thing you know, the light is right there, and you better be ready to grab on with both hands, or it's going to run you over. And that's what I have found. There were moments that you didn't realize an opportunity was going to come your way. You can never see it coming, and you just have to be ready as you can be to say yes and not be afraid. I mean, it's a profession in which you are overcoming your fear on a constant basis, and trying to understand what actually makes a great broadcaster is different than what I thought made a great broadcaster when I started. So it's been a long journey, and I'm so grateful for it because it was, it became a dream, and I have gotten to do it at a level that I never thought was even possible. So I feel very, very fortunate.
That is awesome. And talk about, when you said about, you can get run over, kind of makes me think of the Pac-12. So you get this break to go to the Pac-12. You have this visionary, Larry Scott, that says, hey, we should create a Pac-12 network. So you saw like the Texas Longhorns had the Longhorn Network. You saw the SEC, the Big Ten, all these groups trying to do this. Tell us a little bit about, being there at the forefront. And then now, when you think of a tale of two stories, you have a 108-year-old conference that is just gone, like disappeared. All that legacy, all the Rose Bowls, all the, great things, all the Heisman Trophy winners and things. Tell us a little bit about that journey with the Pac-12.
Yeah.
You said that with a little sadness right there, didn't you?
No, there's, and it's funny because it catches me off guard every time I feel emotional about it. It was the Pac-12 Network was the biggest gift of my career and my life because, again, I was a local news girl in Indianapolis, and Kristen Bredis was the woman who hired me, and I was not ready for that job. But it brought me out here to San Francisco, which is where I wanted to be because my older brother and my sister-in-law were here. And it allowed me, it opened the door to what my life is now, which is, I am married and have 2 kids. I still live next door to my brother. He's got 3 kids. My family is all in the Bay Area or in Southern California. And I have, again, gotten to experience so much in this business. So the Pac-12 Network is, when anybody who has ever started a company or been a part of a company when it has started, you feel like you birthed part of it, right? Like there's
exactly
goes into you know it, right, Ed? Like there's people that until you have gone through something like that or worked at a startup or tried to start your own company, there are things that you just couldn't imagine go into what that experience is. And so it went from when we started, so much energy and excitement and possibility. I am so proud of so many of the things that we did. I mean, I look back and I think about our product. The issue was distribution. That was one of the obvious issues, is that the distribution never came through. There's a lot of reasons that I won't bore your viewers about that I think, from a technical standpoint happened and a strategy standpoint. But I do get asked all the time about like, how did the winningest conference in the history of college athletics ultimately fail? And credit to Teresa Gould, who has rebuilt it and keeping the Shield alive. I am in awe of that woman, and I think she's done an amazing job with what she had handed to her. It's been remarkable to see. But it wasn't just about TV contracts and strategy. And I want to be thoughtful about how I say this because I love and appreciate every single person that I worked with at the Pac-12. So I don't want to, point fingers or say like, oh, it was bad leadership or failed this or that. But ultimately, I think it was the loss of a lot of things that if we all looked in the mirror, and we were all part of it, right? Like I wear it in the same way. The reason I think I get emotional about it is because it died on my watch too, right? I wasn't a passive bystander. But we lost the connection and the relationship with the schools that we needed. And those relationships that are so critical. And when things get hard, they're absolutely critical for success. We didn't have those. And then I think we failed to paint a good enough picture for what the future
was possible.
Yeah. When we lost USC and UCLA. So, again, it was like almost reverse lightning in a bottle. There will be a book written. There will be, I'm sure, many documentaries made about all of the things that went wrong. And there were so many things that had one of them fallen a little bit differently, or if one person hadn't gotten involved, or if you and I may never have met because I probably
still
would
be there.
Different. I'd still be there and I'd be on a different track. So I will end all of that spiel by saying everything that happens that is heartbreaking, and I still feel heartbreak over it. I do. I miss so many of those people. I miss going to a lot of those campuses. It was a big part of my life for a long time. But you always know that when something gets taken away, it's cliche, but there is always something else that's going to come out of it. There's always something to be gained from a loss. And I couldn't have been more lucky to land at the Big Ten Network. I'm so grateful that I've been able to be there. And also, my schedule is much different now. And so I've had time to explore things. It's why I know you, because I was able to, doing some speaking, and I have been able to work on this company Tambor that you mentioned. And so I do feel gratitude for all of it, even the part that I wish had gone differently.
And I appreciate you sharing that. And that was, for those of you listening, that was a very polite way to kind of give some insights on what happened, but accept, part of the responsibility, not throw anyone under the bus. It's always easy to say, well, if this person hadn't done this. And I think it's interesting too, when she just said, this first time I heard her say that, one or two things fall differently, and it's a whole different discussion. And you think about how many companies, whether it be conferences, companies, coaches, that didn't get that one win, that if that changes, the whole trajectory of things change. So a lot of times we're just, byproducts of the circumstances, some in our control, some not in our control. And it's interesting, different outcomes that could have played out.
One of the other things I would add to that, Ed, and I appreciate you pointing that out, but I think fear is such a powerful force. I think I see it in teams a lot. I see it in any organization. When fear is present, it's the ultimate performance killer. And I think there was a lot of fear.
Love that.
There was a lot of fear towards the end of the Pac-12 Network's existence, and rightfully so, right? Like, we were all scared. It felt like every moment. I mean, I didn't realize how heavy the weight had gotten until, truthfully, the following year when I was at Big Ten and I'm watching these games, and I'm like, man, it feels nice to be able to watch a game and not feel like there's an existential crisis at stake. Like, if Michigan loses this game, like, it's okay. We're all still everything's gonna be okay, and towards the end, everything felt so heavy. And so what was so interesting, and it's one of my biggest learnings from having gone through, and been there at the beginning through the end of the Pac-12, that last year, 2023, when we were on the road for football, it was our best year of television that we had been a part of in those 12 years of its existence. And I think it was because the thing we were most afraid happening finally happened. And all of a sudden, there wasn't that fear. Like, we knew it was a matter of when we were all going to be done, not a matter of if. And so people were just better to each other. The relationship between the network and the conference got so much better. Everything felt like we just enjoyed it. And I talk about, it felt almost like senior year, that you got to enjoy everything again and tell people what they meant to you. And it was like almost like a retirement lap going around to all those campuses. And I kept thinking the fans were going to be, I didn't know what the fans were going to be. They could not have been. I mean, I just want to tell you, if you are a Pac-12 fan or a fan of one of those teams, and we ever came across you, I just want to say thank you, because that year, it was the best therapy I could have ever asked for. People were so kind, so thoughtful. The same ones who had been really upset at us for many years because we didn't have any distribution were coming out of the woodwork telling us, how meaningful, that we felt like we were part of their family. So I do think it has made me realize, like, why do we wait until the end for our best stuff? Why do we wait for the eulogy to say our best and most important things to people? But that was a masterclass in understanding what can happen when fear is removed. Everything elevates.
It's interesting. Hopefully everyone wrote that down, that fear is a performance killer. And as a leader of any organization, your team is looking at you. And though your stomach, it's fine if your stomach's churning, the butterflies are going, and you're like trying not to throw up. It is how you're projecting that confidence, that calm, etc. Because everyone is looking for that. And I think about, this is fun for me because we get to talk sports, but you think of a team that, they weren't expected to win, so they get to play more loose. There isn't the conference championship on the line, where if you think of Penn State versus Oregon that we just saw, where Oregon beat Penn State in overtime, and this collapse of this great program, now that we've seen 3 losses in a row, the fear, I'm sure, of not, for Coach Franklin, of not just the narrative, I don't know him personally, but not being able to win the big game, and then being so close, and then having it taken away, and then, all these other things. It's just, it was interesting to watch that was fear, and this narrative that they could just not get off their backs.
It is, Ed, you are spot on, and I think you see it all the time. I feel like this was the case. Ohio State last year When they lost to Michigan, I mean, they were wound so tight for that game. They were not themselves. Who Ohio State became, and it is a testament to Ryan Day and the players in that program to look in the mirror and say, like, this isn't going to be us. They just, ran roughshod over everybody into the national championship and won the Natty after a loss that could have completely derailed the entire locker room. And so it can go either way, and it depends on who is in that locker room and what the rallying cry is. But I think playing loose is the ultimate. I mean, you have to. Anybody who's ever talked about being in the zone, or if, I'm sure you felt it in your athletic endeavors, there are games where you just feel like you've got it. And the confidence, it just, there's something that you can't quite name or put your finger on, but it comes from playing loose and feeling safe. And so I think in terms of how it relates to organizations and leadership, like, psychological safety is what allows people to take smart risks and ask questions and play, and just go all out. And so I think that is the, so often, and I see it all the time in producing, producers are, they've got so much on their plate. They're like the orchestrator and the director of trying to make every broadcast, whether it's a live game or a studio show, all come together. And when they feel nervous, and oftentimes there's a bigger boss standing in the background that sometimes can make people feel nervous. When producers are nervous, it comes through to everybody. Yep. And so I always say the best producers are the ones where the control room can be literally on fire, but when they push that talk back button and they're talking to the talent in their ear, you would think that everything is just as it is and you know exactly where you're going to go and all is well. But there's many other times where you hear in total fear and panic come through, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, geez, I don't know what's going on, but I know something's not right. So it's energy is contagious, fear is contagious, confidence is contagious, and it all starts at the top.
See, I love that, and hopefully everyone wrote down psychological safety. Ashley, that was awesome right there. I like that, the psychological safety, because it allows you to perform. And I don't know if you knew this, but Jack Schisler, new team member at McGill-Jungie, he was the head football manager for Ohio State last year. Oh,
and he's got stories.
Yeah, he'd been there all 4 years. And so a couple just funny things. We'll give Jack a little publicity. I said, what'd you do during that fight, after the game? And he goes, well, I was just running around collecting as many helmets as I could because people had left them and people will steal them. So he goes, I wasn't involved in the fight. I just had 8 helmets. And then he goes, yeah, I thought it was funny when you texted me at halftime of maybe it was the Oregon game. It was the semifinal game where I was just like, because Jack would call plays. So you'd see him on the sidelines and he's in his pink shirt and the armband. He's one of many of them calling plays. And I just said, hey, if I were you, I'd just keep throwing to number 4, which was Jeremiah Smith. And he's like, got it, leave me alone and stuff. Because, but I'm like, okay, this is not really hard right here. That guy's really, really good. But what a testament to Ryan Day and get that monkey off his back. And now you just see that confidence going forward. Something you said interesting, though, to me after the fall of the Pac-12 and before you ended up at the Big Ten, I think you said it was, well, 2 things. I think it was Bonnie Bernstein said, it's always easy to get people to return your call when you're calling as Bonnie Bernstein from, whether it be ESPN, NBC Sports, et cetera. It's different when you lose that title. And you said you had about 50 people that always said, hey, Ashley, whenever you're ready to leave the Pac-12, just let me know. I want to help. Let me know what I can do. And how small that pool became after this happened. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah, no, you have a good memory. So the first thing to double back on Bonnie Bernstein, she was one of the first people I saw on TV and was like, oh, that's what I want to do. I think Bonnie is incredible. And
what a cool testament to her.
Yeah, and just one of the women who paved the way for so many of us who are doing it now and so many who will come later. But the advice, I was talking to her one time and she said, my advice to you is don't underestimate the role that you have right now and what that allows for. She said, I waited to figure out kind of 2.0 and to really dive into my next thing until I was off television. And she said, I would call and people would always call back Bonnie Bernstein with CBS or ESPN. Yeah. But when it's Bonnie Bernstein with, Bonnie Bernstein Productions, I wouldn't always, those calls weren't the same. And she said, so don't take for granted the platform that you have and the access that you have and try and start building something on a parallel track. So Bonnie has given me great advice in the conversations I've had with her. And that was something that has really stuck with me and allowed me to feel like, okay, no, don't wait. Like, there's no reason to wait. If you have an idea, try and go see what you can do to go chase it. And then the other thing on, what was your second point about? Oh, there is a book that I am reading right now called Lifting Up by a woman named Jen Marr. And she talks about how there is a huge gap, and there's all this research that shows this, that we are not as helpful and thoughtful as we think we are. Because we are well-intentioned. And it's not that we don't want to help people, but when you actually look at the action, and Ed, is why I give you all the credit in the world, because you are the opposite of that. So many people say, like, let me know how I can help, and I think that we all mean it when we say that, like, let me know how I can help. But that is different than actually being willing to pick up a phone and make a call. It is different than putting some of your own, professional equity on the line, which is
professional capital and equity.
Yep. And so I found when things were kind of coming down to it at the end of the Pac-12, there were a couple people that really genuinely just went to bat for me. And I will say, Martin Jarman at UCLA, who is getting a lot of flack because of the situation that's gone over there with Deshaun Foster and all the rest, but I will be forever indebted to him, because he was one of those people that when I called him and said, hey, I'm not sure what I want to do, but I think it would be amazing if there was an opportunity at the Big Ten Network. And he said, absolutely. And he started making phone calls. And he was one of the very few people. I had a lot of people say, let me know how I can help. And I know they all meant it. And if I had given them a specific, like, would you please call this person? I'm sure that they probably would have. But Martin and a few others were really the ones that went out and actually just did it. And it meant a lot to me. And it reminded me that when I offer to help somebody, follow up, follow through, go make that phone call. Don't offer if you're not actually willing to take action, because I think it removes it from our headspace. Like, it makes us feel better that we offered to help. It's also when people go through a loss. People do not know how to handle other people's emotions. I just think we have gotten really bad at sitting in it with people and being available and being there. We want to fix things. We want to give advice. We want to offer a general, I'm here if you need me. But, like, what does that mean exactly? I'm here if you need me. So I do this, which is why I can talk about it. But I have gotten a lot more intentional in this book, Lifting Up. It helps you see the gap between what you think you are doing and how you are showing up, and actually truly how you are.
No, and that's awesome. And my wife and I always say we facilitated a parenting class because we were learning as we were going along as well too. But I'll never forget this section on good, better, best, which you could really put to every part of your life. So if you think about saying, hey, let me know what I can do to help, that's good. Better is to say, hey, I'll send out some blanket email, I'll send out some emails, and then that'd be better. But best is, no, let me set up the Zoom meeting. I'll be on there in the beginning. I'll introduce the two of you. I'll fall off after a little bit. But I think that's where we can, as you think of that book, okay, yes, what I'm doing is good, but there's so many more layers above where you can really change someone's life, really help them. And you do it because it's the right thing. And I don't ever keep a scorecard. I just know at some point I'm going to be in that situation myself as well. And hopefully people go, well, that's someone I want to help because I've seen them time after time after time without asking anything in return. And so I always think of good, better, best, kind of a little weird little acronym there, but it's helped me think through things.
Yeah, I think that's the perfect way to look at it. And I think, Ed, there's so much that we are all trying to accomplish. Like, we live in an ambitious world and an ambitious culture. And obviously all the people that you talk to, and I'm sure people who listen to this podcast, are people who are striving and reaching and always wanting to grow. I think sometimes we lose sight, we can't see the forest through the trees, and we realize that, like, yeah, we all want to make money, and it's great to make money and be successful in the eyes of our culture of what success is, which is usually monetarily related. But I think, like, what the actual thing is going to be when we're not here anymore is, how many people did you help while you were here? Like, how many people did you impact? How many lives did you light up in some very small way or in a significant way. And that's why I go around to like, it's the many moments that you have in any given day. Who is, I'm Catholic, so I'm like, who is God putting in front of me today that is somebody that I could help? And maybe it's somebody that's in the elevator with me. Maybe it's the person at the, coffee shop. Maybe I should call my mom. I haven't called her in a little while. There are so many moments throughout a day where if we can get out of our own heads of whatever's on our to-do list and look up and actually engage with the people around us and think about how we can help other people, it's not rocket science, but we are so busy. We are being distracted into oblivion. And I think we're losing so many of these moments to help people. And that's what's the only thing that's really going to matter. Like, it's going to be great if you make a lot of money, but what's really going to be great is when you're not here anymore, but the seeds that you planted continue to bloom when you're not here anymore.
That is awesome. And I want to shift gears now to two different coaches, because you have the ability to be in locker rooms and interviewing coaches. And actually, this is brand new. This is before I asked you about Dan Lanning, because you said that it was yesterday that you interviewed Tim Shipper, who's the UCLA interim head football coach that I think was after 4 games when the AD replaced Coach Foster. And as a Nebraska fan, I had that marked as a W as I saw UCLA just really underperforming. And so I'm like, okay, as you look at wins and losses for any of your teams, you're like, okay, they're 0-4. They have like 12 people in the Rose Bowl watching the game. That can't be real energetic. As long as we don't screw up, we can kind of mark that as a win. And then something miraculous has changed and happened, and you started sharing that about Coach Shipper, who I got to admit, because you just mentioned it right when we were getting on, I'm like, God, why do I not know that name? Where did he come from? What's his story? So tell us a little bit how someone can literally change a program in a 2-week time period where now I'm like, oh, God, okay, and we'll mark that one as a toss-up.
Yeah, no, that game just got a lot different on everybody's schedule. There's no question about it. So I think, we see so often an interim coach will take over at some point. It used to be that it was towards the very end of the season. Now it's happening in the first 3-4 games because that's just where we are in college athletics. But you'll see a kind of an energy surge, a revival, things get shaken up. Again, some of the fear is removed because expectations are different now. And you'll see teams win games that maybe you don't expect them to win. But what is happening at UCLA is like, I haven't seen anything like it. And so I interviewed Tim Skipper yesterday for Big Ten Network, and learning a lot about him because, Ed, you're not alone. Like, people, you wouldn't know unless you were a Fresno State fan. You would not know him. So his dad was a longtime NFL assistant. His brother is actually the running backs coach for the Bills. But he played at Fresno State, and his dad describes him. I read some stuff that his dad said about him. He's like, he's always been the underdog. He's 5'8", he was a linebacker, but he was, tough as nails. And he's coached in many different situations. Last year, he was the interim coach at Fresno State for the entire year. So that is what really, I think, he said that experience is what has helped him know how to do. He goes, I wouldn't have even known the first thing that I needed to do as a head coach if I hadn't had that experience. So experience is important. But what he said is, my first question to him, I said, what was the first thing you did when, and he was very good friends with Deshaun Foster. They go way back. And so I know it was an emotional thing when all of a sudden you're the guy who brought you in is now being shown the door and you're being asked to take over the program. And I said, what was the first thing you did? And he was like, I had the guys clean the locker room. I was like, what do you mean? He goes, I brought him in and I said, look, there is a new standard. And everything reflects the standard. Look around this locker room. Like, this is kind of the epitome of where the program is right now. Like, clean it up. And he goes,
in the shitter, in the crap, yeah.
Yeah. And he goes, and it was sparkling. And he goes, and every time I have walked back in there since that very first day, which was exactly a month ago yesterday, he said, it has been sparkling. And he said, and that it's things like that change, when you kind of look around and are now able to pay attention to some different things. And he said, so that was the very first thing I did was we cleaned the locker room, and reminded everybody like what we have here. what also has happened is they've got a new defensive coordinator, new offensive coordinator, Jerry Neuheisel, who, again,
Rick Neuheisel's son. I knew that one. Same blonde hair. You're like,
the voice is exactly the same. I close my eyes and I'm like, is that Rick Neuheisel? And kind of a quick funny story, but when Jerry Neuheisel, he was a walk-on quarterback at UCLA, which is where his dad played and coached.
Yeah.
Neuheisel, yep. But Jerry was a former walk-on. He earned a scholarship, but he was the backup at UCLA. When Brett Hundley got hurt when they were playing Texas in 2014, Jerry came in and led them to an unbelievable comeback win. And it was this great moment. He got carried off the field by his teammates. And Rick Neuheisel, I was working with him at Pac-12 Network at the time. So we're watching it together in the green room. And Rick is just like losing his mind.
Yep.
It was one, I will never forget. It gives me chills even to think about it. It was so awesome. Rick interviewed him afterwards and was like, Jerry, wake up. This is just a dream. It's time to go to school. Like, it was this great thing. And then I'm watching it play out again because he's at CBS. And they're showing shots of him watching Jerry call his first game, which was against Penn State, top 10 team. And Jerry breathed new life into this offense. And I think there is a belief, and again, you talk about it has to come from the top. And what Tim Skipper and Kevin Coyle, who's now the DC, and Jerry Neuheisel have done, and it's a credit to the players who have all stayed and said, we're not going out like this. That is one of the biggest overnight transformations that I have certainly ever seen in my 18, 19 years of doing this.
To me, that's just a heartwarming story because also, too, I bet part of Tim's appeal with the team is when you have a grinder like that and an underdog that was 5'8", and you're like, God, he played major college football at 5'8". That's not common. And then just the different jobs that he had. I bet you there's just a pure authenticity, appreciation for where he is, being able to, I remember you and Yogi talking about getting on the locker room floor as an executive, where all the conversations, all the bonding happens, that I bet just he exudes authenticity and saying, there is a standard. I'm still going to be the head coach, but let's build this back up together that people are gravitating to.
Yeah, people are craving energy and inspiration. And I think, it has to be authentic. That's the whole thing. Coaches will say all the time the best advice they've ever gotten when they become a head coach is to be who you are. But I think it comes down to, and this is something I talk about a lot too, Ed, is like, you have to really truly know your people, because there are plenty of talented teams out there, both in sports and in the workplace. But connection is always going to outperform talent. Like, you can have all the, separate talent that you want, but if there isn't cohesion and there's no culture, like it doesn't matter. And so I think in order for, to have trust and to feel like your people, it is time and attention, and you can't speed that stuff up. So that's what I think college football right now is in a really tough place. I think I worry about the coaches, honestly, like what they are being asked to do and the pressure that's on them. And the way that so many of these young people who are coming in are getting advised by other adults. There's a lot there that feels hard and sad, and I'm not sure where it's going to end up. But I will say, at the end of the day, there are still so many amazing people in college football who still understand that this is about helping young people get somewhere that they couldn't get on their own and becoming men, and not just great football players, but great people too. So that's, I think, what it's all about. And you can feel that, I don't know, in just talking to Tim Skipper for 15 minutes, I could feel it coming through.
Okay, I'm going to give you credit for something, because we heard Ashley speak at the summit that Ray Scafani and ClientWise put in. You talked about your playing cards. And so, really being able to dig deep and understand your team members. So Kim took that idea. So we're going to have 26 playing cards for each team member. Everyone's going to get 26. And then we combine that with John Gordon's 5 H's that you go through. Who's your hero? What was your hardship? Tell us something, humor. And so each team member at McGill Junkie is going to have their playing card, and then you are going to go around and spend time with each other, and then you exchange playing cards. So everyone's going to have 26 of their playing cards, and as we keep adding more team members, but then spend time with each other on those 5 H's. So it's a little combination of a Ashley and John Gordon mixture together, where I said, hey, Kim, this is what Ashley said about playing cards. That makes sense. She goes, well, what do you want to do with it? I go, I don't know. There's something there that makes sense to me. make it fun. And the next thing I know, she's a marketing wizard, and she goes to Canva, and we have playing cards, because when you said of just really getting to know the team members, especially when you know their hardships, was
Yes.
that one really hard thing in your life, that you went through, but then also who was your hero, and letting someone talk about someone else. I think we're going to have a ton of fun with our playing cards. So I'll let you know how it goes, but we're taking your idea and running with it. That's for sure.
I love that. And, that's awesome. And I love the mashup, and John Gordon, anything that,
He does, yeah.
you should definitely do. But I think that so often, and I worked with a football team where, and for people who don't know, basically I call them your playing cards, or your player cards, which is when someone joins the program or when someone joins your organization, they're filling out a profile that is asking them questions that aren't just, what size shoe do you wear, and what's your hometown, so we can put it in your bio, and what's your major. It's questions about who you are and how you're motivated, and what things you've overcome in your life, and who's important to you, and the dates that matter to you. A lot of these guys that come in, all of us, right? Everybody's been through stuff, and we don't ever make enough time to ask people about it. And so I think understanding your team and who your people are is at the core of a lot of, the best military leadership examples. And that is true for all of us. It is about knowing your people, and that is what's going to help you motivate them. And they're going to want to work way harder for you when they feel like they matter, and they understand how they fit into the bigger picture, and they feel like you know them as a human being.
See, and that's awesome. And I'm going to save, we're going to go a little bit long here just because I love talking to Ashley and it's fun. I've been in the financial services business for 35 years, but Ross, who you met, and I came together 13 years ago to form McGill Jungie. But also a lot of people on the team don't know my first, 20 years or, 15, 20 years before Ross and I came together, which was, I call them those brutal years of building, a financial services practice when, I didn't know anyone. I've never had a paycheck. Started from scratch, was always just going to bet on myself. And I heard you talk about that historian, and maybe talk about that for a team, a company, and then let's move into Tambor, this great company that we're going to continue to elevate, because this is really, really cool what you're building.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And so kind of a lot to unpack there, but I would just say I really believe it, because we forget, as people who have been there from the beginning. I even felt this at Pac-12. You forget that everybody that's coming in, they haven't had the same experience as you. They don't know
Correct.
What it was at the beginning. And we don't have a great way of sort of teaching them. I think you have to be intentional about how you are getting people to understand the backstory of how, your firm or your company or organization was built, and all the things that led to where it is right now, because you'll have a much bigger appreciation for it. And you'll see, again, hopefully where you fit in the longer picture and the longer arc. So Tambor, I would say, started right when we kind of found out that the Pac-12 was ending. There were a few things going on. The podcast that you mentioned that I do with Lisa McCaffrey, that's been on hold recently just because of all the other stuff going on. But during this podcast that I had with Lisa, I interviewed my own mom. And I realized in that interview that there were so many things that I didn't know, that I thought I knew. There were things that my mom said that really stuck with me. And I remember afterwards saying, man, how great is it going to be that whenever my mom's not here anymore, I'm going to have a slice of she and I at our best, that I'm going to have a recording that I'm going to be able to listen to. Like, man, how cool is that? And then all of a sudden it occurred to me, I interview hundreds of people all year long. Why have I never interviewed anyone in my family? And so I started interviewing more people in my family, and it was eye-opening. And I just realized that we are craving these conversations, and we don't make time for them. Kind of what we said at the very beginning of this, Ed. It's hard to make time for these types of conversations. And so one of my dear friends who was a colleague at Pac-12 and now at Big Ten as well, Guy Haberman, he and I started a company called Tambor, where it's an audio legacy company where we sit down with people and get, people share their stories, and we preserve them for generations to come. And so it would be like, basically, let's just fast forward and let's pretend like Tambor started 200 years ago. You'd be able to go listen to your great-great-great-grandmother talk about her life and who was important to her and what her hope is for her great-great-great-grandson. And that's kind of the vision of it. But it has evolved to realize that these stories, we are all living stories every single day. And how are we capturing them and remembering them and honoring them And I think that just simply by recording them, it's such a powerful thing that we can do, both for families and for teams and for organizations. Because, again, I'll say it without trying to be too repetitive, we are moving so fast that we are not paying attention to the things that I think we should be paying attention to.
See, and that's awesome. And where this is going to be different, so this is my little promo for this, is where it's different than others. You can do the ones where you sit down and you record yourself, but do you make time? And a good interviewer like Ashley and Guy and others, there's questions after the question. Someone says something, but then hopefully if the interviewer is naturally curious, then it's like, but why did that affect you? Why is that important to you? How do you want your great-great-grandchild to know? What are those family values? What do you want to know, especially like if it was a family business? How did this get started? Versus them maybe, well, we hear from a lot of our successful clients is how do we keep our kids, humble and hungry, because a lot of our clients are very, very successful and they're worried about that. And so we spend time with families on what are those family values that you want to pass down? And so this just resonated with us of, no, we need to start providing this for our clients as a service. Let's capture what is made, what is important there. And I think it can really have this impact of sharing, because my dad died when I was right after I graduated college. And, I miss not being able to hear his voice. I miss him not being able to tell my kids that never knew him, no, here's what integrity means. Here's what this means. Here's what integrity means when you don't have money. And, my story of my dad, I tell this a lot where, we were driving as a middle school football game. And this is after the, losing the house, government cheese foods and all those things. And he sideswiped a car, barely, and no one would have known, but he got out and hand wrote the note, put it underneath the windshield. My name's Russ McGill. Here's my phone number. And I always wondered, how did they pay, for that damage? And I would have loved for him to tell that story of and I can just picture him would have looked at me and goes, well, I hit the car. Why would I not leave a note? Like it wouldn't have been like this big revelation to be like, well, I caused damage. It was my fault. And you figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so your whole thing just really, resonated with me on that. And then maybe to change gears, last thing here, because I wanted to get this in here because I do want to meet him at some point. You'd mentioned Dan Lanning as just really being this epitome of, in this NIL era, of really hasn't lost players to the portal. Now, part of it, someone could say, well, yeah, that's because you got Phil Knight and you got this, but there's money everywhere. And you do have kids that think they should be starting that aren't starting and things. But tell us maybe to end this with, a little bit about Dan Lanning and just because I sense so much respect that you have from him when you talk about him.
Well, first of all, thank you for sharing that about your dad. And it doesn't surprise me to hear that your dad was that type of man, because in the little that I've known about you and in the small amount of time we've gotten to know each other, that is the least surprising thing. But I think in terms of Dan Lanning, he's somebody who, again, you're around all different types of leaders, and there are so many different ways to do it. The personalities of coaches. We just had Big Ten basketball media days where, all 18 coaches come through this room and I'm interviewing them. And you just realize there's so many different ways to approach this. But I think with Dan Lanning, the thing that has always stuck out to me is from the moment that I met him, when you talk to him, you just feel like you're the only person in the room, right? Like whatever the situation, he is an intense guy, but there is something about he is a true connector. And he understands. He just is he's a master of it. Part of it is that he's young. I think a lot of it is that his wife went through some really hard stuff. She had cancer, and their story has been out there. So I think when you have gone through again some suffering, and you have a different appreciation and understanding for what this is really all about. He's somebody who's not trying to get to the next thing. His famous, line is always like, the grass is damn green in Eugene. Like, I'm not going anywhere. And a lot of people before have used Oregon as sort of a stepping stone to get somewhere else. So but there is just, he realizes, I think he's one of those guys that you don't build culture in, mission statements or writing stuff on a wall. you build it by just these micro moments every single day. And it's the text that you send, it's the question that you ask, it's the room, it's the vulnerability. I mean, I know they share a lot of what's your why, and Dan has opened up, and I've talked to people in the program, and they're like, you wouldn't believe what comes pouring out of these kids, now grown men, but young men that they've never really shared with anybody. And Dan's not the only coach to do it. I mean, I've seen it in other programs where when you make space, there's a retired coach who told me one time, he said, we would have this thing called story time where everyone would go around and share a story. And I'd always start off and I'd share some of my story, something that they probably didn't know that was personal and a little vulnerable. And he said, the stuff that came pouring out of these kids, you couldn't even believe it. And he said, it's stuff that it's like, well, we didn't know that when we were recruiting you. Like, we had no idea that that was part of your story. And so it's a reminder to all of us that it's not overstepping. Like, I think so often we're afraid to, I don't want to go there. It's much more comfortable up here on the surface. But when you make the space and the time, and you ask the questions, people will open up. They will. They just will. And so I think Dan Lanning is so good at understanding that it's the small mini moments. He also, I don't know how he does it, but he finds these edges, and he'll have these themes that he'll sort of put in the mind of his players throughout the week. And I swear it just they manifest on the field. It's wild to see. I mean, Penn State was the most recent example. And again, hat tip to Kurt Signetti in Indiana, because they obviously just went into Oregon and beat them kind of at their own game and out-physicaled them. But when the Penn State game happened, Dan Lanning, he talked about it at halftime. He said, we're just making these little cuts, little cuts, and soon we're going to hit an artery. And that had been a thing all week long that he'd been talking to his guys about. We're going to just understand that we're going to be making little cuts, and then boom, we're going to hit the artery. And it's exactly what happened. And it's, there are a million examples of that. And you go back to all the different examples of last year, which I won't, belabor the point anymore. But Dan Lanning he is the ultimate connector, and he understands how lucky he is where he's at, and he's not looking at the shinier object off in the distance, because he understands what he's got, and it's about the people.
Once you leave, the earth, or what's your impact on others? And there's two things that are always in my head. One was from the great movie Gladiator, what you do in life echoes in eternity, which is another way to say, what you said, what is this mark you're making? And as I hear you just talk about Dan Lanning, I can't help think about one of the greatest things I've ever heard someone say about another person. I was talking to Coach Matt LaFleur, who I know just a little bit, but he sent me a podcast with Dan Quinn, and I was just so appreciative. He sent it to me, and he said, Dan Quinn, who's the coach of the Commanders, is one of one. And I'm even saying that, I almost tear up now to think about, God, what if someone said that, about me? You elevated so many other people, that someone as successful as Coach LaFleur, top of the game, would have that much respect and admiration, where he said, Dan Quinn is one of one. And I always thought, man, that's an aspirational, goal, on that side. So those are things I was thinking about as you were talking about Dan, and then when you said legacy. And what do you want to leave us with today? You get the last closing remarks. Well, I still always talk at the end because I talk too much.
And I will tell you two things. One is you are one of one. I mean, I think that's the thing that we all need to realize, is that the impact that you can make from wherever you are. And I feel this really deeply right now, and especially the last few weeks, for some reason, this has been something that has been on my heart, and I've been talking to a few people about. I think so often we are waiting for an opportunity to be in a leadership position, or to feel like it's our time or our place to help, or to whatever it may be. Be the leader. I say this to people who maybe aren't at that point yet. Be the leader that you wish you had, right? There are so many ways that you can impact and lead within an organization that is not just because the reporting structure allows you to. And it took me a long time to realize that, because as a, on-air person, I've never managed anybody. There's nobody who reports up to me. And so I think a lot of times I was always like, hey, stay in your lane, do your job well. But what I realized is I'm like, oh, I can have a huge influence and help other people from where I'm at. I don't need to just stay in my little bubble and lane. And in fact, it is on me to get out of my comfort zone and see who I can go talk to and help and lift up and engage with to make, again, people feel like they're all part of this thing. So you can lead from wherever you are. I believe that.
Great line.
Yeah. And I think I'll double down on it. Like, you are one of one. And that's not just because I remember Ross came up to me after the speech in Park City, and he said, when you were talking about Dan Lanning, all I kept thinking about is that's who Ed is. Like, that's exactly what Ed, that's how he makes everyone feel in our office. Like, he knows people, he engages, he's curious, he's thoughtful. And so I will give you the ultimate compliment, which is that the person who works with you closest and knows you best says that you are, a version of Dan Lanning. So there's nothing that I think people need to know and understand more than just you can do it in so many ways, and it's not some big strategy. It's not something you have to roll out. It's just being thoughtful and intentional. And again, I've seen it in just being able to be around you the last month and a half, virtually and on the phone and via text. But it's clear you have that. So you can always aspire for more, but you are 100% one of one, Ed McGill.
You just made my day there. That is awesome, and the best compliment when you told me Ross said that, because Ross is actually more kind of keep things close to the best. And I think it was a safe way for him to say it to you, knowing that it would probably get back to me. And that just meant a ton, because I have the utmost respect for him and his leadership skills. And to have a partner that for 13 years we've never even had a disagreement is pretty special. So good yin and yang. And what I would end with today is, this is our first podcast that's gone over an hour.
Sorry.
I wish we had another hour. I saw Jen, because it's actually supposed to be in this appointment, and Jen, my EA, came in. I'm like, no, I'm good.
Yeah.
They can handle it. I got a great team. They can do that then too. But hopefully everyone just enjoyed this episode. You're going to hear more about some of the things, with Ashley and what she's building and doing and things like that. So make sure you like, subscribe, get the message out on what Ashley's doing and building and how she's impacting others. And thank you for joining us for another session of Led Leadership with Ed. But thanks, everyone, for joining. Ashley, you're a true pleasure to have on. Enjoyed it tremendously, and have a great day, everyone.